What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo with Mike Golic Jr. That is me. With me, as always, the Lamb of Pod who takes away the sins of the world, Brandon Newman. Brandon, what's going on?
Nothing. Just coming off enjoying some AFC North football to lull people to sleep on a Thursday night.
It was the perfect sort of golf nap of a game if you weren't careful in the middle.
Yeah. Oh, I had to start actively writing notes of normal things just to stay awake. I wrote, Amari Cooper, still good at football.
Amari Cooper, the most interesting thing I found out about him, I saw him doing an interview on Mark Ingram's Big Trust podcast where he had this big-ass medallion chain on that said the Route Runner on it. And I promise I cannot think of a worse nickname to have made bold in diamonds on my chest.
I mean, honestly, and also, no one really thinks of you, Amari Cooper, for your crisp route running.
Well, I would say they definitely do, but oh yes, Amari Cooper is a professional route runner, as the people often say. But he's also well known for drops in key places and disappearing during random portions of the game. It's one of those things where it's just, if that's a nickname or a title that you ascribe to, that's one thing. It's just one of those, like Kevin Durant, who for years has denied the nickname the Slim Reaper. If you were to get that on some sort of chain or medallion, cool as hell. Absolutely one of the coolest things that you could do. But the Route Runner, again, it's a huge, very ornate looking pendant. It's beautiful jewelry, but I just kept stopping it to see and make sure I was reading it right. And it says the Route Runner on it, which it's no disrespect to Amari Cooper, who is a phenomenal route runner and has done that so far this season. He also had one of those drops we talk about at the end of this game, but it just seems like a weird thing to put on jewelry.
Okay, well, listen, since you waxed poetically about one of my stay awake notes, Geno Smith or Jacoby Brissette?
Wow. You know what? I want to get into more of these because we got a great podcast for you guys today. Obviously, we're going to break down plenty of what we saw on Thursday Night Football, including Brandon's stay awake notes for the late game folks watching on the East Coast last night. We got my dad, Mike Golic Sr, stopping by, Golic and Smetty's very own, to help us look at what we got coming up in the rest of the weekend here. We talk about the news surrounding Ime Udoka, the Boston Celtics head coach, who we recorded that portion of the podcast earlier in the day on Thursday. It was later announced that day that Ime Udoka was officially suspended for the 22-23 season by the Boston Celtics. Doesn't really change the tenor of any of the conversation that we had, but felt like worth throwing in there as a detail that is now official. You'll hear us speak about it from the reports from Woj and Shams and others that talked about it as reportedly. Now it's official. And so we still don't know any more information-wise about what specifically went on. The rest of that conversation applies. We'll take a look at what's coming up this NFL Sunday. Some of the big games on the slate, the Dolphins and the Bills, the Packers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Excited to get into that with Dad for a little bit. We have this might be one of the more informative this, that, and the thirds that we've ever done at the end of this show. Massive baseball news on the horizon and where to find nukes on college campuses. But Brandon, before we get to any of that, Thursday Night Football did happen. I commend you for being able to stay awake during the Cleveland Browns 29-17 win in this game. And Jacoby Brissette or Geno Smith is maybe the most accurate note that you could have about this game, because I was overwhelmed after looking at some of the notes. So the broadcast was on the Thursday night Amazon Prime broadcast feed with Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit. And Sam Schwartzstein, who was a former offensive lineman at Stanford, does a great job helping with the Prime Video sports and analytics insights that you see on some of the alternate broadcasts that you see on the Twitter feed that they've put up here. And if you're not following at PB Sports Stats, really good, insightful stuff about these football games. But to your point, Brandon, about Jacoby Brissette, this was an actual tweet from Sam as part of his Samalytics on tonight's Twitter feed version of this broadcast. He said the player of the game is Mr. Sneaky Jacoby Brissette. The Browns offense knows who they are, run first. If you need to have a quarterback that stays true to the schedule and doesn't take risks. Jacoby Brissette tonight was 100% rushing success rate with only 3 of his throws into tight windows. So Jacoby Brissette went out there and did exactly what he was supposed to in this game. And it was made easier by the fact that you had no TJ Watt on the other side here. Jacoby Brissette, when he wasn't under pressure, 21 of 29 for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns in a game where he only threw and completed 21 balls for 220 yards. So all of his completions came when he was not under pressure. That gets a lot harder with JJ Watt off the field. But yes, Jacoby Brissette returning serve in the quarterback game manager career backups getting starting opportunity contest.
Man, made Mitch Trubisky look like a real rookie out there. Unfortunately.
You know what? Speaking of rookies and Mitch Trubisky's, one of my stay awake notes in this game, one, if you look at Mitch Trubisky's passing chart in the first half, it is absolute comedy. It is a scatter plot of all his completions that are strictly up the right sideline of the field with a couple on the... I don't even know if they threw a pass to the middle of the field until you had a couple of late completions to Pat Freiermuth, their tight end, during the eventually fruitless attempted a drive where they were down 10 late in the game. They were driving the field, and they finally decided to throw it in the middle of the field where the Browns had 2 of their starting linebackers injured and out of the game, including Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and finally decided to take advantage of that for a little bit. But, Brandon, there's no reason, if this is the way the Steelers' offense is going to keep operating, and I understand part of it was trying to account for Myles Garrett, and Myles Garrett alone, no Jadeveon Clowney in this game because of injury. All it was more what we talked about with Nate, college offense, rolling out right, trying to get him moving away, keeping everything simple and in front of him with a couple of go ball attempts down that right sideline. If you're going to do that stuff, put the rookie first rounder in. Like, your offense is already struggling. Sure. You're doing simplistic concepts to try and just keep this thing close to the vest while your defense gets healthy. This would be a great time for your rookie first rounder to just get out there and start learning. I have no doubt Kenny Pickett can go out and do this. And that's no disrespect to Mitchell Trubisky, but that's just where this offense is right now. And so it feels like as we go along here, you can maybe give it 1 or 2 games, but looking at what they are doing and what they're attempting, there's no time like the present, man. Cut the kid loose.
A lot of people that Amazon Prime booth were saying that Mitch Trubisky needed to go out there and play for his job. And some people are saying he did or did not do so. I love watching a struggling quarterback out there because it just reminds me of somebody playing Madden and like putting in on all Madden for the first time, just like working, using the thing that works, like slowly getting down the field. And you'll take whatever the score is at the end of that because you survived. You survived that game of Madden. You survived that level of difficulty and that slow gameplay because you did what you only could do. And George Pickens, without George Pickens, I really don't know if Mr. Trubisky even looks decent. Same way as that without David Njoku, Jacoby Brissette probably has an ass game.
Yeah, I mean, for the Browns, this was all about their rushing attack. What you saw on the ground from Nick Chubb, over 113 yards, 171 total for them. Amari Cooper was over 100. David Njoku, 9 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown. It felt like they were just screening and tight. He ran that old Jason Witten, just run the hook, sit there and catch a ball thrown straight into your chest over and over and over again. So, and listen, Sam's assessment of the Browns is absolutely right. This is a team that right now has to worry about how banged up they are on defense. Anthony Walker, their other linebacker, got taken off after a scary hit in that game. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah pulled up running and looked like it was something in his lower body, some sort of muscular injury that had him over on the sideline. And you already had Clowney out of this game with injury. And a defense that gives it up on the ground. They're a very not good rushing defense right now statistically. So the Browns have some things defensively to worry about. Offensively, they are who we thought they were. But Pittsburgh on the other side, man, George Pickens. I know he had 7 targets in this game technically. That still doesn't feel like enough. The catch that you will all see run today on SportsCenter and every other show that does TV talking about football is essentially like if you took the Odell Beckham Jr. 3-finger touchdown catch, Brandon, and then just tilted it even further on the axis. He looked like he was, do you remember the Kansas City Chiefs, Tampa Bay Buccaneers Super Bowl, when Patrick Mahomes basically threw that pass when he was parallel to the ground, falling down, getting his ass whooped all game. George Pickens looked like he was essentially parallel and then turned upside down to catch that ball fading back towards the sideline. It was one of the most acrobatic plays that I've ever seen, and it doubles down on a theory that I have always maintained. Because if you watch this game, George Pickens walked out there, and I mistakenly read it as long sleeves. He had two of the like basketball arm sleeves on his shirt.
Ooh,
and then underneath, you could see after the catch, he had a loose white t-shirt coming out of his pads. And I've always maintained that if you have players on the field who are either out there wearing no gloves or wrist tape, or who are wearing nothing but a loose t-shirt under their pads, that is the most dangerous person on the field. Because that person doesn't give a shit about swag. That person doesn't give a damn about their own safety in the case of the wrist tape and gloves. That person is just out there to hurt you. And George Pickens, everyone said he's got like a litter of dogs in his chest. He has so much dog in him that it just refuses to stay inside of him. That was the biggest indicator I have seen thus far in his young NFL career. That's a dangerous motherfucker.
Hey, when we were getting introduced to him during the preseason, and we found out that he was a big anime guy, that's when my antennas went up. I was like, okay, we're watching you. But I'm glad you brought that up because our friend Willie Colon, who also plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers, or used to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers, he never wore socks. And I always thought that was like one of the most savage. He said he liked to feel the spikes under his feet while he was playing.
So my mom famously runs without socks, which I already was like, all right, that's a little bit iffy, but I can allow it. Playing a football game with no socks, one, I don't know how you get away with that under the rules because uniform-wise, you have to have the high socks up there. Did he just cut them around his ankle and wear them as like pseudo shin guards?
He said he used to get fined until he got his ankles taped at the top, but would have a cut off top part of a sock at the top of his taping of his spatting.
Savvy veteran.
Yes, but what I wanted to mention outside of Miles Jack being off, because that seemed very, very serious. I am going to be right about my prediction that Kenny Pickett comes and takes over the helm after week 4. I think it was going to like they're playing the Jets that week, but also about this circus catch, which, Mike, I feel like people are kind of being a little bit alarmist. I think it was a great catch, but I also think it was a primetime Thursday night football catch, Mike, where
that's the point.
People were kind of, but I think that adds a little bit more sauce on it. All I'm saying is here's predictions. I think by week 8, we're looking at a better catch that's going to make us forget about this one. You know, it always comes along and like something else makes us forget because the thing that's going against this one, Mike, is it was just a first down, or like it wasn't even it wasn't a touchdown the way Odell's catch was, and I was impressed with it, but it's kind of like it was cool, it was good, it wasn't off the jugs machine, but you would expect somebody who catches balls for a living to make that play.
Brandon, absolutely not. That play was spectacular. I will be with you in rooting for someone to outdo that play. I would love nothing more than that. But to try and downplay that as somehow routine or a catch that tons of receivers would make is just simply not true. I will not stand for that slander. George Pickens, especially if you hear this, it wasn't Mike Golic Jr. saying anything about the quality of your catch. That was Brandon Jarrell Newman, and you need to come find him. Brandon, do you have any more stay awake notes from the game last night? Because if not, we have to finish with the most important or most, I think, concerning part of this game.
Just one, and it was off the very top. Al Michaels is the voice of football. I think it's safe to say, like, he just sounds like football. And I was thinking, like, the amount of leverage you have walking into negotiation with this new Thursday night Amazon Prime. You're like, yes, I am. I'm what football sounds like. What you got? What's the price point?
Al Michaels definitely does sound like football, and he has the distinction of at least being the first person in prime time. I don't know if it happened week 1 or week 2 for the Browns in their normal window. But the first person, at least that I have noticed, and on a primetime window, so a lot of people are going to notice, to really poorly handle discussing Deshaun Watson in the broadcast booth. And man alive, Kirk Herbstreit was staying as far away from that conversation as humanly possible. Al doubled back to it and ended up saying, something pretty inappropriate about how if $230 million guaranteed doesn't motivate you to act better than get out.
It
was all bad. They did not actually say what Deshaun Watson was suspended for: 24 or more allegations of sexual assault and sexual misconduct. The review by the league, which basically corroborated 4 of those and said through a preponderance of evidence that they believed that he had done the things he was accused of in the 4 cases the league reviewed. None of that made air because, as we said, the surest bet in sports was that broadcast booths would be wholly unequipped to have this conversation and have it in a way that can be done respectfully and to give all of the context to it. So this was the
B-roll.
Yeah.
The B-roll was it for it, Mike. While they were doing this, having this conversation, they just were like finding different black dudes with
Deshaun
I messed
Watson
up now. But yes, Deshaun Watson jerseys around the stadium. And it was even the graphic, Mike, that they threw up kind of detailing when Deshaun Watson like slowly makes his way back into the building. I mean, he looked. That matters a lot less to me. And listen, the rest of it, they have to lay out the timeline of when Deshaun's going to be back. They gave all the relevant information. Kaylee Hartung did the ad about how, as part of his agreement with the league, he's got to go to that therapy. He can only use team masseuses for the rest of his career, but they still ignored the main elephant in the room. And so I'd imagine they're not going to be the only ones that do that all year, but it was wholly unsurprising in the way that played out over the course of the broadcast. Thoughts and prayers do go out at the end of this game, though, Brandon, to anyone that had teased the line in this game as a part of. I saw a lot of same-game parlay tickets hitting out there on the internet. Saw a lot of people that had the Pittsburgh Steelers, somewhere around +10, +10.5, because at the end of this game, the Steelers went pitchy, woo-woo. Like, this is going to end up on bad beats with SVP. They went pitchy, woo-woo at the end of the game. They tried to throw the ball around on the last play. They had kicked the field goal, failed the onside kick after that, managed to stop the Browns on 4th down, get them to punt it, and had, 9 seconds left or something from inside their 5, and threw it around, fumbled it. The Browns recovered in the end zone for that final score of 29-17. And, whew, buddy, a lot of people hurting big time on the timeline. So if any of you were affected out there, gambling is hard. It can sometimes have catastrophic results. We're sorry. We'll have the Picc Six later on in the podcast to try and get you right and help make you whole for the rest of the weekend. But a really tough note for some people to end Thursday night on. That's why we're going to try and give you something more to look forward to. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the rest of the NFL weekend and the Boston Celtics head coach Ime Udoka being suspended for the season with my dad, Mike Golic Sr. Dad, I was just talking to Brandon. It was appropriate that Jake got here. I was just talking to Brandon because him and Michelle have had both kids at home recently, and he said that, he was up to his knees and shit. There's just stuff going on when you got 2 kids at home. And Carter's like old enough to party. And I asked Brandon if he was prepared for the day when Carter like stepped to him and back talked him a little bit. And I mentioned what was the context of the story where Jake once told you to step off?
He was in the basement working out, and I went down there. Something happened.
Older Jake.
Oh yeah, this was high school, Jake. It was something with school, which seemed to be the norm, as you well know, Mike. With Jake, so I went down. Your mother, I'm sure, was at her wit's end. So I went down to have a talk with him, and the talk got a little heated. To which at one point he said, "Why don't you just step off?" And I was like, "Excuse me? You want me to step off? Is that what you're saying?" Yeah, let me just say the conversation took a turn at that point. That was rebellious Jake for sure. Yeah, step off. Why don't you just step off?
I asked Mike if he ever got into like a "F you mom and dad" phase, and then he retorted with that story, and I was like, "Ooh, he must have said step off and with quite a tone as well."
Oh, he did. He did. I mean, it was just step off. I was like, I mean, it took me by surprise, not shockingly, because he had never done that. So it was an interesting conversation after that. Let's just say.
That's all I was trying to prepare you for, Brandon, is eventually that day might come, and I want you to be more prepared than Dad was for that moment.
I
was not prepared for it. I did not see it coming.
I don't know. Listen, this may be cultural, me bringing up horoscope signs while talking about child rearing, but my son is very much a Pisces, and him being very emotional and strong willed. And anyways, when we were at actually the Subpar Classic, I was talking to Trevor and Kyle just about Braxton, about child rearing things, and they were talking about spanking, not spanking, things like that. And Kyle was like, looked at me dead in my eyes. He's already so much bigger than me. He was like, "You got to make sure you put the fear in them." I was like, "What?" Right. He said, "Just make sure they're afraid." So just now today, he had to. We're in the process of using the potty, diapers, and things like that. So he really doesn't like changing his diaper because it's like laying down. He's not a baby anymore, right? So I was like, "Get your poopy diaper. Come on, change the diaper." And then he laid down and said no. And then I gave myself, "Okay, I'm counting to 5." And the way he was laying down in front of me perfectly by 1, I felt so good. It was like cathartic. It was weird. It was weird. I don't want to chase that.
I'm telling, and they're right. You got to put the fear in. I spanked, but only a couple times. Like the side of the butt. But it sent the message for sure. And there is an element of, because listen, at 3 years old and parent, it's not a friendship stage. It's an adult and a kid. And you got to set the parameters. There was one time, and I wasn't young. I was probably in middle school, and me and my brother Greg were outside playing in the yard, and my mom was out hosing the lawn, and my mom said something, do something. And I said, no. As soon as I said it, I said, oh shit. What did I just do? And she sprayed me with the hose. And then she said, get in the house and wait for your father to get home, which, you see that in all the old school things, wait for your dad to get home, but it was true, and sure enough, I went in and out. I was like, I'm screwed. I'm done. So I'm waiting in my bedroom. My dad comes home. Sure, you hear him, and you basically pee yourself at that point. And my dad comes in, and he's like, "What did you do?" And I told him, and he said, "Let's go. You're going to apologize to your mother." So he grabs me by the scruff of the neck, and we're walking side by side. Right? He's taking me by the scruff of my neck, side by side, to my mother in the kitchen to apologize. Now, Brandon, understand, we're coming to a hallway that only fits one person. And we're side by side. And my dad kept walking. He walked through the opening and I walked into the wall. and then was proceeded to be by the scruff of the neck taken into the kitchen to apologize to my mom. Yeah, it was
clothesline into the wall.
Yeah, my dad was definitely there was the fear. And then obviously it grew into a great friendship with him and all that, but yeah. Early on, it was fear, completely, without question.
I just love the idea of Carter being at that stage where he doesn't want to be a baby and doesn't want to have someone change. What I would give for not necessarily the diaper changing now, because it'd be weird to be butt naked and covered in shit in front of my parents. That would be like a thing that maybe happened drunk when I was in college by accident a couple of times. But all the rest of what came with it, I would absolutely take back in a heartbeat right now. Those are things that you're absolutely going to miss. So Carter and other babies out there, man, enjoy being in the lap of luxury for a while. When you call out, someone comes and changes your poopy diaper. That's not going to happen again until you're way on the other side of the back nine of life. And it's not going to be a fun experience then. I wish more kids were able to enjoy that stuff. You've got some
let me tell you,
over your parents.
I know when I need that done in another 20 years, Sydney won't do it for me. There's no shot.
We're going to do it like Grandma Kate did to you. We're going to do it with the hose.
Spray me with the hose?
Take him out back and spray you with a high-pressure hose. It's going to.
I guarantee you there's people out there right now who already heard me talk about how I spanked you guys and how my dad just did that and think what a bad parent I am, because in today's world that just, that doesn't happen. And that's fine. I mean, I get, the evolution of everything, but I do agree there should be a little bit of fear from that young child to the parent to know, who rules the roost. And, it's like, no, we're not having a conversation here. At this point, what I say goes, okay? And that'll change when you live somewhere else.
It is so interesting to think about that, because so often parenting gets linked to coaching and stuff. And, Dad, you would appreciate this, because I thought of you when I was talking to Mel Tucker on here last week, the coach at Michigan State, and asked him what it's like going into a locker room now and having to lead with why. And he said it's just that. You don't get to walk in and just dictate anything anymore. You've got to bring immediately to the table, this is why we're doing this. This is the benefit that comes on the other side of it. And that part has definitely changed, and that part's not going back. Like, listen, everyone's going to have parenting strategies, and as long as you're doing right by the kid, I understand things change. I'm with you. I have plenty of friends that, don't abide by that. But with coaching, that's one area. And now you're dealing with grown folks and somebody else's kids. And it's just amazing how different, and I think for a lot of good reasons, that's become. But it was interesting talking to someone who's dealing with that now, as you've got a generation, even more than me and Brandon's, that's predisposed to asking, all right, what's the reason behind what we're about to do in this off-season program or in this Tuesday practice or something like that?
Right. So he's someone that's crossed over to that. Me as a parent with you guys, that wasn't around. You just listened to what we said, and you did it. But if I went on to be a coach, I'm sure I would be dealing with that as well with players of today. And I guess for me, it's not that I'm everything old school is right, because certainly there's a lot of old school things that change. We talk about this all the time in sports and even in life, obviously in parenting as well. But that doesn't mean it's all bad. There's some great new school things that go on from coaching or parenting, but I think there's a good mixture. You don't just poo-poo what went on back in the day. There are some good things, good ways to parent and coach, even today. But there were some bad ways. Just like every new age, new wave parenting and or coaching thing isn't always right. I think there can be a good mixture of things, and to not just fight one side and say, oh, it's only this way now, or, oh, no, it's only that way. I don't think we need to do that. I think you can find a nice
obviously
mixture of
it is conditional, but I certain things that people just demand just get removed. I mean, even Ezekiel Elliott, when we were talking to him this week, and I know you guys talked to him on Golic and Smetty as well, he said, talking about the chip block, he said it's legal until it's taken out of the game, right? And it's like, oh, like that that flip has to be switched so often with football players, and we're so used to just things just being completely eliminated and taken away from the game. So with that, and kind of thinking about kids and youth league and all the stuff's going on right now at this time of year, football around the country, Tommy Rees recently got memed a lot because he was kind of inspiring Drew Pine in a way that, gets mocked a lot in popular football culture.
He was motherfucking him, and it got caught on national TV.
Yes.
He was MFing him on the phone during the game, and it got caught on national TV.
So recently, I just went to a youth league game, my buddy, and he's coaching a bunch of 10-year-olds. And he's kind of MFing them too. And I'm sitting there with my 2-year-old and am I going to feel a type of way 8 years from now if he's, Carter's in the huddle and he's getting MF'd by the coach, or if that's just football? So do you think that will ever get eliminated from the game?
No, I don't think that'll ever get eliminated from the game, but I think it'll get hidden more. You heard Tommy explain that. I heard him in his presser saying, listen, some guys need to be coached certain ways. And he's right. Some guys need to be yelled at. Some guys need to be kicked in the butt. Some guys need to be patted on the back, and he said Drew responds to this type of coaching. As I've talked about with this, and I forgot, you do so many of these, you forget where. But as I said, that's not the first time Drew Pine has heard Tommy Rees swear at him, okay? No one should go, oh, my God, what are they doing? I guarantee you, Mike, you've been in practice. We've been in practice. That's what goes on there. Right or wrong, whether you like it or not, that's what goes on there. So that was just coaching then. What Tommy said was, he goes, I'm basically, he was saying, I think between the lines is it's a shame I got caught on tape saying it, because now what's going to happen, he knows that camera's up there, and now he knows what happened. He's going to take that game plan and he's going to cover his mouth when he's on the phone. And he's still going to MF him, but he's going to cover his mouth. Just like coaches cover their mouth calling the play so you can't read the lips what the play is, Tommy will do that up there now, so you don't hear him motherfucking him. You just know he's yelling at him, but you won't see it now. So that's the only thing that's going to change. Don't think there's going to be some, the light has been seen now, and a coach gets caught in that, and all of a sudden is going to start coaching differently.
Well, I would say this. Tommy's still a young coach, and so the thought that eventually that may not be the way that he communicates with a player
it's possible.
Is not something I would discount. Because the one thing I would say, and the one thing that we've seen disagreements pop up out in the past, and I'm not saying that this was Tommy's intent, because this is a little bit different, and maybe it's not. Maybe you've got the camera up there, but the notion of when we've seen in the past a player, a coach showing up a player on the sideline or grabbing his face mask or something like that, that especially now, I thought about it more through the lens of recruiting, since everyone's so obsessed with that, and how this plays to people that are watching that aren't there. Because that's the one tough part about all of this is it's such a public spectacle that, I have no doubt. Listen, Harry Heastand, who's there now, is my O-line coach. That guy coaches hard as shit. You don't get to see it all the time in that same way. And so that's something that happens in the room and on the field there. And it's something that you understand because he's invested in you the same way that Tommy is invested in Drew Pine and that you see every day. The trouble with all this tends to be the outside world isn't privy to all of those moments where you've built up that relationship to where you can communicate honestly like that. And so that's the thing I always worry about is that something other people use against you? And is that a reason why Tommy eventually, and most coaches eventually, kind of shy away from that, especially now, just because recruiting is such a cutthroat game and this stuff can be used against you when it's potentially out there like this. That was the only thing I worried about. It wasn't that Drew can't take hard coaching, and it wasn't that I think Tommy's an asshole and that he doesn't care about Drew. That's the furthest thing from the truth. But it's just, again, the outside world lacks the context that we all get. And so these things just end up getting passed around.
So along those lines, because I agree with you, the outside world would see that and be aghast and go, oh my God, it's the norm to all of us. So that's why I don't know how much it would, as far as recruiting, because players are in that. Even in high school, that kind of coaching goes on. So I would think a player is less shocked to see that if there's a fan that watches that and goes, oh my God, but a player is watching that and going, oh yeah, man, he's getting on him good. I remember when my coach did that to me or whatever, but you just see that publicly. So, but I agree with you that he is young and that may subside over the years, but I don't think because of that one incident, I don't think we're not gonna hear Tommy Rees, if I go to a practice, hear him swear at practice or hear him swear into the from the coach's box anymore. I just think he's going to be a little more discreet about it and covering his mouth. So I completely agree that the fan is not used to that kind of treatment from coach to player. But I think most time players see that. Laying hands on is different. Grabbing the face mask, grabbing the shoulder pad, shoving a guy, something like that. That went on in my day, and it was even looked upon like, wait a minute, you lay your hands on me, we're going to – man, I remember Buddy Ryan when I was with the Eagles, and we would fight all the time. And he told the coaches, he said, listen, if you want to get into it, go ahead and you can get into it as well. But understand, if you do anything physical to a player, they're going to do something back to you, and you have to know that. Now, Buddy was a little different, and it wasn't the best climate all the time. But I just think so. I think the physical aspect of that, is gone. But the rough language, man, it's just words. They've never really affected me like that. So it did nothing for me.
And I think when it's something,
I had no issue with it.
And I think when it's something like that, because we've seen plenty of instances, and you can go back and look at like the Mark Mangino era at Kansas, where that was defined by some terrible cross the line things that words get said. And I think that's it. Most of us around college football and around sports in general know there are actual terrible things that happen, and someone just getting on you hard because of what happened in a play hardly ends up being that situation.
Right.
By the way, speaking of Notre Dame, did want to bring up and shout out, I know you and Jess talked about it the other day on the podcast, Golic and Smetty going to be doing a live podcast Friday before the Notre Dame and Stanford game in October. What is that, October 15th? You guys are going to be at O'Rourke's?
The game is the 15th, though. October 14th, the Friday. We're going to wait till after the pep rally, which is usually at 6 till about 6:30, quarter to 7. And at 7:30 at O'Rourke's, which is one of the restaurant bars right across the street, right at campus there. Mike, where you and I and we did a show there. It was great. We did one of our morning shows there. We had a ball doing it. So we're going to do it live 7:30 Friday night before the Stanford game. We're going to do a live show. I know, Mike, you'll be out there, so you'll be a guest on. Oh, you probably have to leave already. That's right. You'll be calling a game, right? That's right. So you probably won't be there, but yeah, we're gonna have a ball. That's gonna be a lot of fun. We're gonna do some tailgating and stuff the next day, and we'll have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, so if you're in South Bend for that weekend, Golic and Smetty going to be out in full force Friday and Saturday there. I'd imagine you guys are going to be drinking during that show at O'Rourke's, right? This is a little different than when we had to go on live radio. Like, I remember one of my favorite days of radio that we ever did was when we went to Columbus to do the show, and we did it from was it like a Gordon Biersch? I forget. Or no, it was a Hofbrau house that we did in Columbus. And we were waiting the whole time. That place was packed. It was 5 o'clock Central. It started because it was in Ohio. And when we got there at 4 a.m., the place was already packed and they were already serving booze. And so we get to 9:45. We get to the last segment of the show. And these guys had been catcalling me the whole time. They're like, come over and do a shot with us. So I went over and did a shot before the last segment of the show. And then as soon as we finished the show, we were sitting right in front of the bar. And Dad just turns around, yells, beer me. And they bring over 2 mugs for him and Trey because they hadn't gotten to have anything yet. And everyone's yelling at him to chug. And it was the proudest that I have been of my dad as an adult. He goes up there and absolutely deletes this beer as Trey. God love Trey. Trey, very good at some other things that'll get you feeling good. Yeah. But chugging beer, but not necessarily his bag. Dad went out there, deleted that thing, belched for the entire crowd, and let everybody know. It was as primal a moment as I've ever witnessed for you, Dad.
I mean, the amount of alcohol we drank in the first 15 minutes. Remember, we had the shot skis. We had the shot skis, about a 4 or 5 the shot glasses on the skis. We were doing those with the man. That was a lot of fun. But yes, there'll be, even though this is a live show at O'Rourke's, I'd imagine there'll be some drinking. We'll see if DraftKings was really going to be, want to deal with that. But, you know what I'll do? I'll ask for forgiveness rather than permission and just kind of have at it.
Before we get out,
seems like the right way to go.
Before we change gears off of antics in bars in Columbus and coaches putting their hands on players, can Urban Meyer come back and actually take over this Nebraska job? Or this?
Urban Meyer is going to come back to college. Yes.
So
absolutely.
His remarks recently was that I'm happy what I'm doing right now. I'm happy at Fox. And I was like, isn't that what he said right before he took the Ohio State job?
Oh, he's going back, and I don't even know if it'll be Nebraska. We know every year there's good jobs that open up. Why would he commit to something right now? He'll be so sought after because what he says publicly and what his agent is doing privately are probably 2 different things. He'll never coach in the pros again, nor should he. That was horrific. But listen, he was and he had some of the issues in college as well, but he won. I mean, that dude won at Utah. That dude won at Florida. That dude won at Ohio State. He'll win again in college. Now, and there's a difference of coaching professionals in the NFL and doing some of the shit he did where, these guys, man, are like, we ain't playing that bullshit. We're in college. He's coaching 18 to 22-year-olds. The interesting part of it may be when he sits in the living room of the 18-year-old's parents, and they have some questions about some of his actions, though some may say, listen, some may say privately, listen, this guy gets kids to the NFL and that's where I want my kid to go. He's not going to coach my kid in the NFL, but he can get my kid to the NFL. And that's what I talk about when you talk about, the top recruits they're going after and such. That's what these recruits are looking for. A great school to go to where I can play, maybe win a championship, but mainly get to the NFL. And Urban can coach you there. I mean, so he's going to coach. If he wants to coach in college again, he's going to coach in college again.
An NFL team just gave Deshaun Watson the highest guaranteed contract in the history of the sport because they are so concerned about being good. there will always be someone desperate enough to go to a person whose morals we all don't agree with. And I wouldn't, if I'm a parent, probably wouldn't want Urban Meyer coaching my kid based on what we've seen and known. But we know that so many of these schools like Nebraska, who are so desperate to be good again and be back in the place that they thought they can be, will absolutely turn to this guy. So yeah, I agree with you completely.
I knew fan bases were okay with coaches, messing around with women. We can get to the Boston Celtics if you want to later on. But I didn't think that they'd be okay with the whole kicking a kicker. I thought there was a line drawn there, but apparently you're right. It's like as long as they're winning games, but they weren't winning games.
They're going to win.
And I'm not saying it's right, but that's how the sport operates. And to act surprised
we're just telling you,
by how this sport operates.
Yes. We don't get a say in this. We're just telling you what we think is going to happen. And there'll be a school desperate enough. And as soon as he signs somewhere, they're going to get some top level talent that are going to go there because that kid and the kid's parents are going to say, this dude is going to get me where I want to go. And, that's all I'm concerned about.
It will be interesting if and when that does happen, if Urban, because this was the first time in the pro job, even I said beforehand, he gets the benefit of having adjusted everywhere he's been because he had those gap years in between programs, some of which were tied to the circumstances that he left under. But he always, especially when he would go take these TV jobs, would kind of sit back and adjust what he would come back and do offensively, kind of help modernize his approach. I wonder if, especially now with everything in name, image, and likeness at the transfer portal, if he's going to be able to manage it in the same way, because Jacksonville was the first time he failed to adjust to the surroundings where he was. And number one, shot in the pride. A lot of that was a big bit of public embarrassment. Everywhere else, he had left the program somewhat in different positions and different levels of shame between what went on at Ohio State with the receiver coach. Obviously, a lot of the off-field impropriety tied to Aaron Hernandez and the Florida program. But this one was, that was players and coaches under his watch. In Jacksonville, it was him. It was fully him in the spotlight. Yeah. And now we hear all the time from these older coaches about how much shit's changed in college. That would be the one part that I'd be interested in to see. And again, Dad, to your point, we're going to get a chance to see it at some point. Oh, yeah. It's just going to be a matter of when. But Brandon brought up what's going on in the NBA, and we've got, we'll get to some NFL stuff in the show today. Dad, you're calling games for Westwood One all fall. I'm very interested what your takeaways were, getting to see Tampa up close at the beginning of this season, what you've got coming up this weekend, and a couple of the other games around there. But this Ime Udoka story with the Boston Celtics, it has been fascinating how quickly we've started to kind of chew this up in the news cycle. For anyone that's missed it, the Boston Celtics head coach Ime Udoka is likely facing a suspension for an entire year for his role in an intimate relationship with a female member of the franchise's staff, sources told ESPN on Thursday. Now, this was first reported by Shams over at The Athletic. And basically, and I want to get the verbiage of this right, because the way it's phrased is at the center of all of this. Yeah, Shams' first report said, Ime Udoka had an improper, intimate, and consensual relationship with a female member of the team staff, sources told The Athletic. And I guess the first thing for me here, guys, is, Dad, were you surprised at all by what the punishment supposedly sounds like for this? We don't know a ton about this situation, but one common refrain I've heard from a lot of people is you have seen CEOs at other companies. You have seen, I believe there was a member of the executive office for the Minnesota Timberwolves who was fired for a similar offense not too long ago. Were you surprised that this was a 1-year suspension for something that in some other places will get you flat out fired for having a relationship like that in the workplace, where we know there are power balances? You're a employee and a high-ranking employee in that organization with a position of power. Was any of that surprising to you?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of sides to look at, because you look at, when you see this on Twitter, you get immediate reaction from everybody. And so much of the reaction was, at first, these are two consenting adults. If they want to have a relationship, so be it. He's got to worry more about, I know he was in another relationship, yes. So that's his private life. Okay, so that's him. He's got to, it's kind of like the Urban Meyer with the woman at the bar. My thought was, okay, well, to me, that's the personal thing between him and his wife. To me, the egregious part from the sports side was he bailed on his team after the game, where everybody went back after, because I called that game, Jacksonville in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
I called it for Westwood One. And he stayed behind. That never happens. A coach never stays behind unless it's some family emergency, and going to a bar isn't a family emergency. So my thought was, well, that's between him and his wife. The part of him leaving the team and dusting them was unbelievably egregious from the sports angle. The other is a personal life. So I heard a lot of people saying, wait a minute, if it's consensual and they're adults, so what? That they should be able to do what they want, and he'll deal with that in his personal life if he's dating someone else or married or whatever a situation might be. Now the issue is it's an organizational rule that you know about, unless he's going to come out and say, I didn't know, like a George Costanza. If I would have known it was wrong to sleep with someone on the staff, I wouldn't have done it, but that's known to be a rule. So you knowingly broke that rule. So, I mean, it's, there's going to be some penalty for it. In all honesty, Mike, I was surprised it was a year. I didn't think it would be that much. I didn't think it would be a complete, because again, it was wrong. It was consensual. So we're not talking about sexual assault or anything even worse than that. This was a consensual with two adults that went on. So in all honesty, I was kind of surprised at how stiff the penalty was for this, though this could be the organization saying, listen, this is a serious rule for us. You bust this rule, and you know what? Sorry, you're going to pay the price. So, that's something that, as you mentioned, at other places you get fired for it. So it's a rule that is taken very, very seriously. So, you know what? You broke it. You did the crime. You got to do the time.
It was interesting to me to think about that, because on one side you could say it's a show of severity. On the other side, and I saw people wondering, is this so they don't fire him right now and he can go take a job with another team this season? There were people speculating about that. I even wondered on the side of, hey, why did people were wondering why they didn't fire him. I said, well, because he was a really good coach. Like, if he had been a really bad coach and the Celtics team had finished the season the way they did in the first half, maybe they're talking about letting him go. But I'm not going to act surprised when organizations base their punishment decisions off how good you are and how important you are to the organization. And that was something, because my biggest takeaway from all this is there's got to still be a lot that we don't know.
Of course. Because
for what we have heard reported and what is happening as far as the punishment that's being reported right now, to me, there's a disconnect somewhere in the middle of exactly how this went down. And that, to me, is the biggest problem I've seen with so much of the reaction. Is I feel like we're skipping a lot of steps in this, because so many people have been quick to try and jump and say, well, why are him and Robert Sarver receiving the same punishment of a year ban for what they've done here? I saw people compare this to, why are we talking about this so much and not Brett Favre? Why did he get suspended this much, but Deshaun Watson's only suspended 3/4 of a season? And my response is, why are we reaching for all of these things to talk about how bad this is? Things that are so different. That was I understand the intent is to say, this is extreme and look at these other areas where sports hasn't done enough. But there's too many differences. You want to talk about apples to oranges comparisons in a lot of this.
True.
These are different leagues that we're talking about. This is, in the case of Brett Favre, the judicial system that's dealing with the fraud situation going on in Mississippi right now, and the lack of information in all of this. Like, Ime Udoka is being punished by the Boston Celtics for their rules. What we saw with Robert Sarver was the NBA charter. That wasn't even collectively bargained. That was the charter written by the owners in that league. Deshaun Watson was punished by a collectively bargained process in the NFL in a different league. All of these, Brett Favre, detailed reporting about what he had done and the process that he had been a part of with that fraud. Robert Sarver, detailed reporting by Baxter Holmes at ESPN with what had gone on there in an NBA investigation. Deshaun Watson, detailed reporting by Jenny Ventris and a bunch of other people, and an NFL investigation that went into all this. And with Ime Udoka, we don't even know exactly what happened inside of this. And for people to try and reach and compare it to penalties under different formats in different leagues, when, like, I understand why we do this. We did it with Deshaun Watson, but we did it with other cases that were at least under the umbrella of domestic violence and a sexual assault in the league that were under the same conduct policy that this was being judged by. You're looking at different places with different metrics for how they do this, and then asking all sports to somehow have the same bar for how they go and play judge, jury, and executioner in an area they're already ill-equipped for. That was the part where I was just like, and I understand it's out there. We're going to talk about it, but man, we got to slow down. I understand the intention behind those comparisons, but I don't think it's helpful here.
Listen, I completely agree with you. I mean, when you start comparing, as you mentioned, when something is disciplined by the league, disciplined by the team, disciplined by the authorities, where the Brett Favre situation is going, you can't do it. You just can't do it, but people want to. My view I just gave right now is based off the information we have right now. Yeah. That's all I can do. Now, if the information changes, then my viewpoint may change on it, because I think I agree with you that there may be more out there. But in this day and age, and I say in this day and age because things grow over time and change over time, and this kind of behavior, it's almost in every industry out there. Like I said, there are so many people that will say it should have no effect. They're consenting. They should be able to do what they want. But these companies have rules, whether it's in sports or whether it's the real world, in my air quotes, they have rules. And there are some rules that are going to bring down a lot more thunder than others. And this is one of them. But also, to your point, if they finished last in the conference last year and they brought back this coach for some reason, he'd be gone. I guarantee you he'd be fired. We know there's a hierarchy. There is an absolute hierarchy. Every players know it in the locker room. That's why, when you hear the old story and Jimmy Johnson is coaching the Cowboys, when if there's a backup whatever falling asleep, he gets cut. If there's a starter that fell asleep, you just ask him to try and stay awake during the meeting. I mean, it's the way it is. That's not going to end. So my viewpoint is based solely on the information we have and is subject to change if more comes out. Because I agree with you, Mike. I think more is going to come out.
Obviously, all these rules are put in place to protect people in some way or another, right? An organization, a group of people, individuals. Yeah. This individual situation, you talked about how the fact that Ime Udoka could probably go get another job, tomorrow, right? Because he is so good. And that's why it's so interesting that it's so steep, because it feels like there might be some embarrassment from Brad Stevenson or whatever's going on there. But my thing is, this young lady who was in this relationship, I imagine she might love this job more than she loves him. And I don't know if she's going to be protected. And I don't know if she can walk around and get another job. Well, go ahead, Mike.
And that's why so much of these rules are in place, because we also know women are not treated fairly when these kind of stories come up here. You already saw people trying to circulate pictures of who they thought it might be.
I saw
the Celtics
what does she look like?
And how irresponsible.
Yeah, I saw. What does she look like? Like it matters to the grand scope of all this thing. Like people want to justify him cheating on Nia Long because it's salacious in the story. But I mean, with this going on, Adam Levine, all these things colliding all at once, it's so wild right now.
Well, but that's a great way to frame the story. Like, Adam Levine is guilty of running around or if you take him at his word, just sending messages he shouldn't have to people. If you look around long enough on the internet, maybe it's worse than that. Right. I don't know. But that's, again, Dad, to your point, like, that was going back to like Tiger Woods. That was his house. When Tiger Woods had the press conference to apologize for all that, felt like the weirdest thing on earth. Because what are you apologizing to us for? Your infidelity has nothing to do with how I consume you as an athlete.
Exactly.
And that's the same with Adam Levine. I could care less. I listened to songs about Jane going to the gym today. That album bangs. Maroon 5 is great. And I'm not going to stop listening to them. We have actual monsters in music. We just did the R. Kelly shit for the last number of years. That man's going to hell with gasoline drawers on. And so if you don't listen to Remix to Ignition now, I understand that. But with Adam Levine, that's his house. With this one, it is different because it is an employee. It isn't, it sounds like in this case, probably someone who has the head coach of the Boston Celtics. You're in the pecking order above a lot of people. And the danger and the power imbalance and that
power struggle
between a man and a woman in the way people treat this on the outside is exactly, Brandon, to your point, why these rules are in place to begin with.
And I get the rule, absolutely, because what is going to happen to her? Because will her name ever become public? Well, I'm sure within the organization, a lot of people know who it is. What happens to her job? How is she perceived? So, yeah, you get why the rule is there. But I guess at the end of all this, it sounds like he'll be suspended for the year, and we'll see. I guess we just have to wait and see if more comes out. Maybe this is it. Maybe it's as simple as this is our rule, and you broke our rule, and you're in a power position. So, sorry, dude, you're sitting, and you're going to sit for the entire year. That's how meaningful. Because what if this happened? And I mean, because I guess you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, right? What if they suspended him for the first week of the season? Then everybody's losing their ever-lover mind saying, wait a minute, this guy's in a power position, even though it's consensual. I mean, it's within an organization where it's against the rule and he gets a week. So, which obviously we don't think is going to happen, but you have to look at both sides of it. So I think nowadays you're going to get companies coming down stronger, than maybe they would have in the past, but still maybe not strong enough if there's a good player, a good coach, a good GM, a good president, whatever the situation may be, how good you are at something may come into play with how much you're disciplined.
Yep, and I won't act like that's unique to sports, but I think it's especially prevalent in sports just because we put so much time and focus on this stuff and because the roles are a little bit different. So, like you said, we have a lot more to learn on that story, and so I'm going to pause before we say too much on it and get us to some football this weekend because, Lord God Almighty, it's week 3 in the NFL, and we're very excited for it. And Dad, you're doing Sunday nights this week, this year for Westwood One. So you guys have San Fran at Denver this week, right?
Yeah, San Fran at Denver in Denver. Jimmy G is back. Now, listen, I thought Jimmy Garoppolo at some point was going to play, whether it was because sometimes you just don't finish a season, you miss a couple of games because of injury, or if Trey Lance played bad. I thought Jimmy G, it worked out very well for San Fran that he ended up staying there and redoing his deal for the team because I think of everything as from a former player's standpoint and how it affects the play. And I tell you what, I don't think anybody is happy that Trey Lance got hurt, but there is definitely a comfort level that those players in that locker room have with Jimmy Garoppolo that they did not have with Trey Lance. They just didn't. Trey hasn't played enough. Trey hasn't been in the battles enough. Trey hasn't led this team to a Super Bowl. We all hear about Trey Lance. He has a high ceiling, and he very well may. He may. But the term is used a lot. You only get so many bites at the apple, and San Francisco was playing with virtually a rookie quarterback this year with a really good team that could maybe do something because tell me the NFC team that's running away with it right now. I don't know who that's going to be. I know Philly's playing really well right now, but nobody is really head and shoulders above everybody else. So there's a comfort level those guys are going to have with Jimmy Garoppolo that's going to give them a little bit of kind of exhale to say, okay, we have a guy who's won for us and has taken us to the Super Bowl, and we have a pretty good team.
Is there anything to the fact that they're growing comfortable with a situation that isn't going to win them a Super Bowl? Because there's something to be said of the growing pains with this high ceiling that Trey Lance possibly could have had at the beginning part of the season that matters a little less to most people right now and kind of work the kinks out before the games actually start mattering because we've seen what Jimmy Garoppolo can do. So I think when they were getting their minds ready for a rebuild, they were getting ready to be uncomfortable, and now they might get back into a position where they're comfortably no longer in competition. And obviously they always make it, or not always, but they make it to the NFC Championship game so much you can't even say that they're out of competition. But there is something to that. There's a reason why they wanted Trey Lance to start.
Oh, one of the reasons they wanted to start because a GM and a head coach traded up to get him. There's egos involved in here as well. And that's one thing that I was going to wonder about if Trey had struggled, at what point would those guys have made a move to Jimmy Garoppolo and for the rest of the locker room, or because of ego said, we traded up to get this guy, he's our guy, he's going to be it, he's going to be that guy, and we're going to leave him in there to do it. And you're right about the rest of the team because that's what they were given. Their scenario was Trey Lance is your quarterback. not there's going to be a competition. Hell, they were trying to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. Save for the shoulder surgery, he probably would have been traded somewhere. So it wasn't a, hey, you might have one or the other. It was Trey Lance is your quarterback. So that's the mindset that you're going to get into as a team. Okay, so now we got a guy who has been in the league a year but hasn't played a lot. There's going to be some growing pains. Defense, we may have to step it up a little more. Running game's probably going to have to be a little better while Trey is learning. And you're right. We hope that everybody was right and the ceiling is high, but there's still some unfamiliarity, a little bit of uncomfortableness of the fact that we think we can do something now, and how is he going to progress? And now the shame is we still don't know. We still don't know. And now he's going to miss the rest of the season. He's going to rehab for a long time, and he's going to come back, and he's going to get a chance to be the quarterback again, most likely, though it will be very interesting if Jimmy Garoppolo, after taking, basically redoing his deal from $25 million to $6.5 million with incentives, if he has a great year, now what do you do? What do you do if he takes them 2 rounds into the playoffs? What if he takes them to the NFC Championship game? What do you do? I mean, do you still say, we're going with Trey? I think they probably will because where they drafted him. But Jimmy could make it a really, really interesting conversation.
You know what? I've said that a bunch, and then just hearing it back now, I realized Jimmy's done all that shit before. Why wouldn't they replace him? They already replaced him once. They did it in the most painstaking way possible. And so short of winning the actual Super Bowl, I think you're right. I don't think there's anything Jimmy can do that would get you that job back, because then again, financially, and we've talked about this a bunch, you got 2 years to make that decision on the 5th-year option or what you're going to do with Trey. It behooves you very much to find that out. And so, Jimmy Garoppolo, if he wins the Super Bowl, now this all of a sudden might be hard, but I don't think anything short of that's really going to do it. And for the rest of this team, it's one of the better rosters top to bottom in the NFL when healthy. George Kittle's been off the field for the first couple of weeks of the season, their star tight end. But, Ded, I also want to look at the other side, because Denver's been one of the more fascinating dumpster fires to start the season this year.
They have.
And outside of cringy Russell Wilson doing cringy Russell Wilson things, what we've seen from Nathaniel Hackett so far, does that make it hard if you're a veteran in that locker room to go and buy into all those things, to look at a coach who has, I think, made a bunch of very public mistakes and big moments in these games? And is it hard to look and then take direction as you go into this season now? What's that process?
Listen, and as I've been preparing for this game and obviously talking to people and reading things as well, coming from the team, Hackett has been like one of the first ones to say, I've got to do better. He already, on that situation with the 64-yard field goal or let Russell Wilson go for it on 4th and 5 in the first game, he already said he made a mistake that he should. That was one of those. I know we talk about the world of analytics, but I don't know in what world you choose a 64-yard field goal over and this isn't, some slappy, first-year quarterback, some guy that's a Hall of Famer who's done this so long. I don't even know how that was a decision. So he got that wrong. And he's basically what he's been saying is he needs to make his decisions quicker, and he's not. If you look on their roster of coaches, they have coaches that are called strategists. So, they have and you start to wonder at some point, are there too many cooks in the kitchen? Especially on game day. If you want to have all these conversations during the week as you're game planning, if this comes up or that comes up, we want to do this. But if that discussion is going on in real time, now you're losing time in making the decision you want to make. These decisions have to be made. If you're at the 50-yard line or in plus territory and it's, 3rd and 8, you got to already let whoever's making the decisions, hey, if we get it to 3rd and 4 or less, we're going for it. So plan accordingly. You got to have those decisions made, and he said he's not making them fast enough, and that's one of the biggest things he has to change. And listen, no first-time head coach comes in ready-made. Everyone was a first-time head coach at some point, and they're going to make mistakes. But it does seem like, and listen, his dad coached for a long time. He comes from a coaching family. He's been around this game a long time. So I think there is a little bit of surprise of, oh, wow, when the moment is upon him, it's kind of getting him right now. And hopefully he's learning from that And it's only 2 games in, so I'm not ready to, certainly not ready at any sense to write him off. But it has been somewhat surprising. I like hearing that he's taken responsibility for it. Shouldn't have made that one decision. I need to make decisions faster, whether that's not listening to everybody right away, us discussing it, but during the week or before the game or however it's going to work. But that's all got to come faster. I mean, I think the expectation when Russell Wilson went there was instantly, here you go. Now that this is one of the reasons the AFC West on paper is considered the best division. I still think top to bottom it is, but it's not like they didn't have other issues. Even though John Elway spent years trying to find a quarterback after Peyton Manning, they have other holes as well. And then when you get Russell playing bad like he did the last game, that certainly isn't going to add to it. To your point, Mike, I don't.
Well, because I look at other stuff, it's also like the decision making. It's also shown up. They're one of the most penalized teams in football right now. I think they're near the top of the NFL in pre-snap penalties. All these things that are sloppy play that usually, and part of it you might be able to write off to the beginning of the season now is a little bit more like a preseason because of the way the offseason's structured, because of the way training camp's structured, and all of those very real things. But those are also penalties, and we can look in Mike McCarthy's direction as well for the Cowboys last season. Those are things people tend to generally lump onto coaching because it's your job to police discipline across the team in a way that sends the message.
Right, and I agree with you, but you mentioned Mike McCarthy making those mistakes. He's been doing this a long time. Hell, Andy Reid has been criticized for his game management at time, and he's a Hall of Fame coach. So it would be, I think, irresponsible of me to say, Nathaniel Hackett can't do it because of these mistakes. Now, you get into, and you guys know this from playing, what's one of the worst, couple of the worst things you can do on the field is make a mental mistake, because the one thing you can control is the playbook, knowing where you line up and knowing what your responsibility is. If a guy kicks your ass, that happens. You know what? If a guy's better than you physically on a play, that happens. If you line up in the wrong spot, block the wrong man, go in the wrong gap, that's on you. You should know that. And then what would be worse than that is repeating the mistake. So for Nathaniel Hackett, let's look next week, the week after, week 7, week 8, week 10. Are we still having these issues? Is it still going on? Is he still not learning from these situations? Then I think you can start to say, okay, do we have a bit of a problem going on here? And we know it doesn't matter, NFL, college, or whatever. The leash, there are no 3 and 5 year plans anymore. The leash is a lot tighter on players, on coaches, on everybody to get your act going maybe sooner than sometimes it should.
Yeah, well, especially because you're not going to have the luxury of saying, all right, well, we'll just nix the quarterback because you just went and locked yourself and tied yourself up to Russell Wilson for a good long time. He's going to be there. It's going to be whether or not the coach is going to be along there with him. Speaking of other places with issues, Dad, you had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah.
They're one of the big games of the weekend, and I think right now, looking at them in Green Bay, it's just trying to figure out who's going to be on the field for both these teams right now. Because if you look at the practice report from Thursday, 4 wide receivers from Green Bay showed up there. So much so that the team brought receiver Travis Fulgham to the practice squad and released a safety. But you had Randall Cobb did not participate, was dealing with an illness. You had who else is on here? Sammy Watkins showed up, was a limited participant Wednesday, didn't participate Thursday. Christian Watson, limited Wednesday, DNP Thursday. Alan Lazard, limited Wednesday, DNP Thursday. And then you have the other side, still no David Bakhtiari coming back on that team. And then the Buccaneers, Mike Evans suspended. Chris Godwin's been injured for the first few games of the season.
Julio Jones
nicked up. Donovan Smith, who is back and was, I think, a limited participant on Thursday, but his backup who had been in there just got put on IR. So, Dad, from what you've seen from Tampa so far, how real are the offensive concerns? Is it as simple as they're just not healthy enough to function right now, or are we seeing the stress from Tom Brady bleed over onto the field?
So I think what we're getting out of Tampa Bay is the early Super Bowl years of the New England Patriots. Defense and running. What Tampa's defense is phenomenal. And Leonard Fournette is on one right now. I mean, he feels as healthy as he ever has. He had such great stories, but when we did that game, he has, like all these guys, they have like personal chefs now. Well, he's a big gamer, like a lot of these guys are gamers. And he would game Fournette in the offseason until like 5 a.m. And instead of then his personal chef making him breakfast, he would tell his personal chef, I'll see you at lunch, make me a good lunch. And he'd go to Waffle House. After gaming all night, he'd go over to Waffle House, and it's certainly not on the nutritional, even though I think Amazing. Waffle House is fantastic.
It's great.
Not what he was supposed to be eating. Absolutely love it. So, but he is running well. The line is run blocking well. Pass blocking, they were struggling, certainly against Dallas. Dallas had a really good defense. Micah Parsons was eating everybody up in that game. But I think they're going to be led by defense and by Fournette, and they're going to fill in the gaps. Now, you see they brought in Cole Beasley on the practice squad, so he's going to be elevated at some point. And we know Tom loved, the slots, the Amendolas and the Wes Welkers and those. And so that's what Cole Beasley will be in that slot and be a reliable receiver at some point for him. But, other than that, I think it's basically hold your breath every week on who's going to be available. Julio Jones, when we did that game, that was game number 1. One of the things Julio Jones had said to all of us was, this is as healthy as I've been in a long time. An off season where I really had no nicks to worry about, and then boom. That's what happens when you've been in the league that long. You're going to get nicked up. So, again, I guess I put it on what I said about San Francisco. There is no team in the NFC that has stood head and shoulders above the crowd. Again, we're only 2 weeks in to where I say Tampa Bay can't be there. But Tampa Bay is not going to do it with the likes of throwing the ball around to Mike Evans and Godwin and Gronkowski. Even if he comes back, we'll see. They're going to have to do it a different way. Can they still do it? I think they can because of their excellent defense, but it's certainly not going to be the way Tom wants. Tom wants to throw it everywhere. I guarantee you they were losing, or they were winning in that game. I forgot what it was. It was 9-something or 12. It was all field goals, I believe. And I bet Tom, even though Dallas looked awful offensively, Tom had to be livid in that locker room saying, we got to put it in the end zone. You can't kick field goals, and win games. You've got to be able to put it in the end zone, and they haven't been able to do that very well. So, and I don't know how well they're going to be able to do it for the rest of the year. I think well enough to be somewhat there at the end. But, you just cross your fingers on what receivers are going to be along for the ride.
Well, do you still like the Saints as much as you did preseason after 2 weeks?
Man, I tell you what, that one, I have to admit I've gotten a few things wrong, which happens. I was a little surprised with the. I still like their defense. I do. Jameis, the one thing under Sean Payton is I knew he wouldn't throw a lot of interceptions because Sean would sit him. And he had, 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in the 7 games he played last year before he got hurt. We'll see, because you saw him, what he did in Tampa and what he did at Florida State. Dude was just a gunslinger. He thought he could throw it through people, and he'd throw a lot of interceptions. So if that becomes a problem, and we were all saying how good it was that they kept the head coach in-house and Doug Allen kept everything kind of the same, and that should help Jameis. But that's going to be the big thing to watch for me, is Jameis going to start throwing interceptions.
Yeah, and listen, Pete Carmichael's been there as the offensive coordinator for a long time. You can ask, how much do you have to do when Sean Payton's your head coach and Drew Brees is your quarterback? But he's been around in that system, but we know plenty has changed there. Teron Armstead off that offensive line, and some of the moves there affects the way things go. There's still a unit that's, I think, blocked things up decently well through the beginning portion of the season. But for Tampa, it's so interesting how night and day it is from last year, especially on the pass defense front for them, just because they had been so banged up, some personnel changes. That was really the weakness of their defense that they've now been able to come back through. That's why the matchup with Green Bay is so fascinating, because right now that's a run-first football team, the way they want to be. They want to operate with that backfield first and foremost, whether it's passing out of it. And again, you're not going to be able to beat the hell out of Tampa up front the way you beat the hell out of Chicago up front, but that's clearly the directive right now, while the rest of this receiving core, which is young already and doesn't have a lot of time under task with Aaron Rodgers, but now is banged up and limping into this game where we're waiting to see who's going to be out on the field. this is, I mean, I'm going to give my Thicc Six later on for the picks for the weekend. The under in the Packers Tampa game seems like a veritable certainty at this point, based on the walking wounded and the style of play going in.
Let me tell you, I did the Packers game, Packers and Bears game last Sunday. When they have Jones and Dillon on the field at the same time, they did for 12 plays. First week they had them 7 plays, and that'll grow. And when you imagine having Dillon lead blocking. He led block for Jones on a touchdown run on Roquan Smith. And it was such a mismatch seeing the thigh monster. I mean, A.J. Dillon's thighs are so jealous of them, are unbelievable. But seeing him, forget carry the ball, but lead block then. I mean, it is, and you're right. And I even said it before that game when I gave my keys to the game. I said, while they're getting used to this wide receiver thing, now they got Lazard back that game, but I said they're going to run the ball. And, man, they did, and they ran it extremely, extremely well. It was, and I agree they'll keep doing that, but obviously you're going to have Aaron throw the ball. He's so friggin' accurate. It's ridiculous. I think one of the things, though, to maybe turn the page here for a second, see what you guys think. Some of the big talk this year had been 2 quarterbacks. They turned out to be Alabama quarterbacks, even though one was gone for one of the years. Are they going to be able to secure their spots and be the long-term futures of their teams? And that's Tua and Jalen, Hurts and Tagovailoa, Miami and Philadelphia. And I tell you what, early on, I mean, they are both passing the tests. I mean, even though I think Jalen only has like 1 touchdown pass and 1 interception, I believe. So from the passing side of it, he's not doing it as much, certainly, as Tua is, who's out of his flipping mind right now. Yeah, Jalen has one touchdown, 1 interception, but he runs the ball incredibly well. And so I think they're both actually doing well. Tua is throwing the ball. Well, Tua's always been a short, mid-range guy, had a little more trouble with the deep ball, underthrows it some. But now he's got a guy in Tyreek Hill and even Waddle who can bail him out when they need to. But here's what I get a little tired of is 2 weeks in, people still saying, "Oh, you know what, Tua." Not that it's wrong to say they may not think he's the future, but still not giving him credit for doing what he's doing so far. You have to, right? I mean, I know they got some more weapons for him. I get it, but he still has to be the trigger man for it, and he's doing a pretty nice job. So you got it now. Will that continue for 15 more games? We'll see. I think there'll be some up and downs, but you got to give him credit for what he's doing right now.
So I think this reminds me a lot of, I would call it I'll try and phrase this because I almost went the store brand route. This is like a couple of standard deviation points down talent-wise. The same thing that we saw Buffalo and the Ravens doing for Lamar Jackson and for Josh Allen at the same time. Both those organizations, when they brought the quarterback in, said, we're going to put a bunch of stuff around you to try and accent the things that you do really well. And we're going to try and support that while in Josh Allen's case, you grow and improve accuracy in a way that we've never seen. And in Lamar Jackson's case, as Greg Roman figures out that, hey, you played in a Bobby Petrino offense in college and you can throw the rock out here, which we've seen so far this season. Both those organizations did that and allowed these quarterbacks who are already freakish talents, but we know plenty of quarterback talent gets ruined in the NFL by circumstance and staffs and the organizations. Miami and Philadelphia have done the same thing. They've accented the things they do well. Nick Sirianni decided they were going to be a running team last year. And now that their O-line's healthy, it's one of the best in the league. And so it allows them to do all this. They brought over A.J. Brown, who is great over the middle of the field, where we had seen Jalen Hurts a little more hesitant to throw the ball last year. And so, yeah, I think both of them have done really well for themselves. I heard Mina Kimes say it. Jalen Hurts doesn't have to be great for that team to go and win a Super Bowl.
No.
That's the kind of roster they've got around there. With Tua in Miami, it's a little more interesting to me because I think you're right. It's going to be more boom or bust. And we saw that. They're capable of that fourth quarter they pulled off all the time. I don't think honestly, looking at this weekend, because it's Buffalo this weekend, so now everyone's kind of interested in the AFC East. Yeah. I am going to pick Buffalo in the points until someone proves to me they can hang with this team. Sure. And I don't believe that's going to start this weekend because Miami also went into that fourth quarter down as big as they were. And this, especially on the back end, is a much more disciplined Buffalo Bills defense than what we saw in that secondary for the Ravens that spit the bit at the end of that game. And so until further notice, Buffalo -5.5 is the play for me, because I cannot look at them and say, after you slay the defending Super Bowl champions and last year's 1 seed in the AFC, like it was fucking nothing. This Miami team is going to have to show me a lot more before I'm going to believe anyone's within shouting distance of Buffalo right now.
I would say this: being in shouting distance of Buffalo doesn't mean you're a bad football team, or I'm saying because Buffalo is just so head and shoulders over everyone else. So I'm looking at this game mainly because the biggest difference, in my opinion, between the Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa, putting a team around him, is the fact that the Dolphins went and got a head coach, Mike McDaniel, that has been the difference maker for Tua. Right, it's almost like what you just said about Sean Payton and Drew Brees. Obviously, we know Drew Brees was talented before Sean Payton, but chicken and egg because of how great Sean Payton has been. This guy might be actually very, very real. This Mike McDaniel guy, and obviously he has the weapons in Tua, and he drafted very well. And that backfield is just filled with those tweener type running back wide receivers that are perfect for what he wants to do. But when he gets hit in the mouth, that's why this game is so much more interesting to me. We're going to see him have to score points to even compete. And obviously Brian Flores was too much of a defensive-minded coordinator. Obviously, we're seeing this with Marcus Freeman in Notre Dame a little bit. Defensive coordinator, defensive-minded head coaches coach a little bit differently. And Mike McDaniel is built for the NFL, apparently.
I mean, listen, Mike, I'm with you. I'm taking Buffalo in the points until further notice. But I think in both of our DraftKings top 5, I think we both had Buffalo 1, and I think we both had Miami number 5.
Yep.
So we had Miami in the top 5. So this is a great proving game for them, because everybody and their mother, I still think, is going to take Buffalo in this one, and they're going to say this is a proving ground for a Miami team that between Edmonds and Mostert, they have 16 and 17 carries. They're the two guys. Hill and Waddle, they have 25 and 20 or 19 and 15 receptions. Next closest is 5. They're the guys. So you clearly have defined who your guys are, and I think that's exactly what McDaniel wanted. So Tua, tell Tua, these are your guys. These are the ones that are going to do the thing with the line blocking in front of you. So this is who we're going to ride with right now. But I hope it's a great game, because I have no skin in the game at all. So I hope it's a great game. But I still, Buffalo is just the most complete team in the league to me right now.
Well, and I mean, you talk about our top 5s that we put out there. I tried to approach this. My thought process was similar to the college football playoff committee, and looking at, especially early in the season, at head-to-head, kind of valuing who's undefeated. I still had the Chargers in there because they gave the number 2 team in my top 5 everything they could handle, and that was without Keenan Allen and with a quarterback who was playing the back half of that game with busted up rib cartilage. But with Miami, part of me wanted to rank Baltimore above them still, because for 3 quarters and change in that game, they looked like the better team, and they looked like the better team handily. Yeah. And so that is, like, in my top 5, Baltimore is sitting right outside of the club, just waiting to get in right now. Like, they had a bad guy to girl ratio, and so we couldn't let them all in at once, and we're waiting for a few people to leave. But rest assured, they're right outside.
Yeah, ours was pretty close. I think we both had the same. We both had the Bills first, Kansas City, Philadelphia, and then you had the Chargers, and I had Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
And then we both had Miami. And the Chargers, listen, I think are an excellent team. Justin Herbert's going to get to know the needle here, I would imagine, tearing that cartilage. I did that the first game of a season. I forgot what year it was, and I got shot 13 weeks in a row. Ugh. Now, my position at D tackle is a little different than quarterback, but let me tell you, that shit works. He won't feel a thing. Now, the problem is afterward, do you do any more damage to it? And you feel like shit afterward. And he's a hell of a much more important player than I ever was, and does, a whole lot in throwing the ball. But it works. It's just a matter of, do you go down that road? Do you want to let it heal on its own? Or do you want to go down that road and not missing any games? Because there's a way. And I don't know where people are in the league anymore with that. I know with the pain pills, that has taken a turn as well, and the needle. I mean, that's all stuff we did all the time. I don't know personally how prevalent it is. I'm sure it is to a point. I don't know how much anymore. but knowing it's the cartilage between the ribs, it is something that's manageable with the needle. And I know he was out in shoulder pads practicing. So what you do a lot of times is you test it during the week. Like I would take the needle during the week and see how it felt, see if I was getting enough. How was the pad then working over to make sure I wasn't feeling anything? Again, two different positions, two different types of players. I get it, but the same injury, you have to kind of feel it out and see how it's going to go. And then it's a personal decision on whether that's something you want to do or not.
Yeah, at that one, and you talk about how that'll swing the outcome of the game. I mean, Chase Daniel, I think, was taking reps this week to potentially get ready. Jackson's getting 7. Now, I understand they're going on the road, and this is a markedly better pass defense than the one they kicked the teeth in with the Colts. But all of a sudden, if it's Chase Daniel throwing the rock around back there, this is a different ball game. And that Jacksonville team, that's the only win in the AFC South right now, is a little bit more like the dog. So that's a line to definitely keep an eye on going towards the weekend based on what kind of injury news that we get there. Going to be a fun one. Dad, enjoy Sunday Night Football. Enjoy Baby Jackson since you're out in Boston right now, getting to hang with him. We appreciate the time, man.
Hey, no problem. We had him out for a nice walk before and dinner. It's a lovely young man. He's already calling me Pappy, and he's only 8 weeks old. It's pretty impressive.
The child is gifted, especially since he's Jake's baby. I figured he wouldn't be talking until he was like 4.
Boy, isn't that the truth? And then not talking well because Jake, you know. Oh, that's mean. I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? You can edit that out, right, Brandon?
All right, Brandon. We promised them they're back before we get to this, that, and the third to finish off everybody's week. It's Friday, which means it's time for picks. Did the math on the season. We are still trying to climb out of the cellar that really week 2 did me in. Last week, 2-3-1 on the Picc Six. I forget actually if I called it the Picc Six with 2 C's or the Thicc Six heading into the first podcast. One of those two. We'll go back and check the records eventually. The Pick or Thicc Six. Either works. Last week, we got back out of the gutter a little bit, 2-3-1 on the weekend, 4-12-2 overall on the season. So not great, which means we're really going to try and get it back together this weekend. NFL picks, we're going to go 3 NFL, 3 college picks going into the weekend. NFL, Chiefs -5.5. These lines, by the way, all courtesy of DraftKings Sportsbook, if that needs to be said at this point. Chiefs -5.5 at the Colts. Colts pass defense, man or zone, can't stop anybody right now. I know they're getting Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce back in their wide receiver room, but that still doesn't feel like a team that is equipped right now. Protection's been an issue on the left side. I like the Chiefs getting a big win on that one, able to spread the love around against a much more porous defense than the one they faced against the Chargers. I have your Baltimore Ravens -2.5 on the road against New England. I think some of New England's pass defense numbers buoyed by the fact that they got to play the Pittsburgh Steelers last week, who clearly don't throw the football all that well. Week 1, Miami was able to throw the ball on them quite a bit. And I think Baltimore and this Lamar Jackson passing offense will be able to do that too. That was a team that was much better than Miami for almost 3.5 quarters of that game. I think they show up in New England.
Cha-ching! Sorry, I don't know, kind of as you go through these.
Cash. Yeah. And last one for the NFL. We talked about it a little bit with Dad. Green Bay versus Tampa, under 42. I think this is going to be a sloppy game. We have a ton of guys on the injury report. It's going to be a little bit of a mashup there. That's why the line for this game I'm going to kind of stay away from. Probably, going to end up being more of a pick 'em based on where most of these rosters are at. But I'll go under on this. I say it'll be a sloppy track, and both teams lean into the run, try and let their defenses go out there and win this thing for them and keep it nice and low. College football, we're going to go James Madison against App State. App coming off a couple of big weeks. You take down Texas A&M. You survive Troy coming in with College game day in town. A lot of emotions. And here comes James Madison. Their first year moving on up to FBS. Doing really well. I think surprising a lot of people production-wise. They're getting 7 points. So James Madison +7 walking into App. I don't know if they win it outright, but they definitely have what it takes and have shown that so far to keep it close against an App team that if they can maintain focus through this, they're better college kids than me. I'll say that.
I tell you what, you're a dangerous man picking that game. It's basically a pick 'em, but I like where your head's at.
Hey, listen, James Madison getting a full touchdown feels like good money for me. The other one, USC -5.5 versus Oregon State. This has been a wild one to see how close this line is. Oregon State's been able to throw it around a bunch. They have one of my favorite offensive lines in college football. But if it's down only at 5.5, feel like you got to go with the Trojans on this one. If this USC team is who we think they are, and Lincoln Riley and this offense that have been able to throw the ball around so well, I'll take the Trojans -5.5 there. And then the last one, I'm really trying to get back into the win column here, so I'm going to go and cop out with a prop bet. Tavion Thomas, running back for Utah, over a half a rushing touchdown. They're playing Arizona State. They're getting and this is a line I saw at the beginning of the week. Utah was favored something like 12 over Arizona State that had at that point just fired Herm Edwards. The line's at 15.5 now. Of points being given to the Sun Devils. Little too rich for my taste because things can get weird out in the desert for that team, but really bad rush defense from Arizona State. Utah team that loves to run the rock. Tavion Thomas is an absolute bowling ball of a man. Easy one there, trying to pad the stats. I'll make no bones about it. We'll try harder next week. So there is our Picc or Thicc Six. Hopefully you can cash that one into the bank. And when you do, and you got a little more money in your pocket walking around, take it on over to our friends at Knockaround Sunglasses. Brandon, these knockarounds, man, got me right for the summer, getting me even more right for the fall right now. I tried out a different, oh my God. He's got them on hand at all times. You know what?
Shit.
So do I.
Okay. Come on then. If you got some knockarounds, go ahead and knock around.
These are for the YouTube audience, by the way. And again, I didn't say this off the top of the podcast. We got rolling pretty quick. But download, subscribe, rate, and review GoJo wherever you get your podcast. 5-star rating. Check us out on YouTube so you can see the knockaround sunglasses. These are the ones I go running in all the time. They've got the little rubber on the inside of the nose here so they don't slip, slide, or bounce. Shaking the hell out of my head right now. They don't move.
Yep.
Rock solid. That's because Knockaround's polarized sunglasses, in addition to costing right around just $30 per pair, they also have great form like this that helps you for a run. Runner's World Magazine named them a 2021 Editor's Choice. You can get them in a variety of colors. If you're watching on YouTube, you see me and Brandon, very different styles, very different looks right now. That's because in Knockaround's custom shop, there's over 1 billion possible combinations that you can choose from there. They're lightweight. They have great clarity. Rubber nose like this, no slip, slide, or bounce. Knockaround sunglasses are high-quality polarized shades at a truly affordable price. Check out their huge range of shades at knockaround.com and use promo code GOJO at checkout. Very important. Going to get you 20% off at checkout. So again, knockaround.com, promo code GOJO, 20% off at checkout. Remove glasses to make a deliberate point. And that deliberate point is, Brandon, it is Friday. We want to end the week on a high note for people. We got very important things to get to on the way out of here. Do you know what time it is, Brandon?
Oh, no,
Great Friday song. Great Friday song.
Thank you, sir.
Doubling up in a short amount of time, but it is tradition. Download, subscribe, rate, review GoJo wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review. And tell Brandon how much you want him to dip back into the Zach Brown catalog as we go along here into the fall. Since we are now officially in fall, we have gotten past the autumnal equinox of September 21st. We are in it now. Very excited to be very close. Libra season out here. Gang, gang. Brandon, speaking of things that happened last night, no 61st home run for Aaron Judge and the Yankees. He goes out there and continues a streak of walks all over the place. But the good news for the Yankees, they get a 5-4 walk-off win in the 10th against the Red Sox and clinch a playoff berth in the process. And while I am definitely a little bummed out for friend of the podcast, Adam Amin, who was on the play-by-play for this call with Fox, it has now set us up for a very special moment for this podcast because the Yankees' next game is going to be tonight, if you are listening to this podcast on Friday, September 23rd. And part of tonight is the fact that this game is going to be broadcast, the Yankees and the Red Sox, on Apple TV Plus with our friend Katie Nolan. Brandon, this is a potentially electric moment, and it's one that doesn't come without interesting stuff around it because the Yes Network and the Yankees had, I believe, actually put in the ask to have Michael Kay, who's the voice of the Yankees and the Yes Network, to actually step into the broadcast booth and try and pop in on this one because he's the voice of the Yankees, because this historic moment for the team and the franchise was one they wanted to potentially have him as a part of. And he said no. Steven Nelson, who has been the play-by-play with Katie Nolan along with Hunter Pence in that crew, he said, I wouldn't want to do that to Hunter. I wouldn't want to do that to Steven. I wouldn't want to step on his moment. I would hate if someone did that to me. And so there's going to, I'm sure, be a bunch of workarounds, and they're going to have cut-in rules and things that they put aside so that the ESPNs and Yes Networks of the world can go in on this game and bring it to everybody who's watching. But I love nothing more than the idea that Katie Nolan's voice could be forever associated with the moment that Aaron Judge ties this home run record at 61, potentially on this Friday night. So, podcast family, we need to put a full Spirit Bomb's worth of energy into our friend Katie Nolan and into Aaron Judge so that this moment happens tomorrow night, and so that we can have that sound and try and somehow get it cleared so we can play it on here for you guys the next time we have Katie around. I already texted her and told her, if this happens, she's got to completely shove Steven out of the way and just grab the wheel on this and make sure she is immortalized in history, because that call is going to live forever. It's going to be one of the two calls. The tying call and the one where he hits 62 will live forever, and I want this so badly for our friend.
Mike, this is like when Jimmy G just sat back and the position ended up, the ball bounced his way. The ball bounced Katie's way, and I'm so happy for her. We talked about this on this podcast, and that's why I think it's most important. We spoke into the existence, and everyone else who listened to that podcast was saying it out loud, and it was getting into the ether, and now it's real, baby. Aaron Judge, Katie Nolan. I just love that. I love that.
We need to figure out a hashtag that people can tweet at Katie in support of this moment.
Ooh, Judge Nolan. Judge Nolan. Judge Nolan. No.
Can you do numbers in hashtags? God, I sound like such an old.
What are you going to do, Judge Nolan?
Judge
60.
Judge Nolan 61.
Judge Nolan 61.
Oh, you could do it. Hashtag Judge Nolan 61. All right. If you are within earshot of this podcast at this point, tweet hashtag Judge Nolan 61 at Katie Nolan and make sure she feels the love heading into tomorrow night. This is in the rivalry that has been the center of her life. We talked with her about being a Red Sox fan, calling these Yankees games. She mentioned how likable Aaron Judge is. It's perfect. So if nothing else, tweet at Katie Nolan. Wish her good luck on this. We're all rooting for her. Could be a very exciting moment for Katie Nolan, for baseball, nay, the world. Brandon, let's get to that, because that is my appreciation for a good troll has grown more and more as my years have gone on, especially working in this job. And I feel like that's what we got going on around the Dallas Cowboys right now. Because in the same day, we had two stories that I think somehow worked their way back to the Cowboys. First, former Saints head coach Sean Payton said in an interview with the New Orleans Saints podcast that he could be interested in returning in 2023 for the right situation and the right front office and organization. A name in Sean Payton, who has been so often linked to the Dallas Cowboys, who are, managed to steer and right the ship after the week 1 loss against Tampa Bay on opening night. But then comes the right hook. Jerry Jones, who is, I think, the premier troll. He is the Skip Bayless of NFL owners, grand poobahs, masters of space-time continuum. Because Jerry Jones, when asked by the media about what we had seen going on so far with his quarterbacks here, Dak Prescott injured in week 1 against Tampa Bay. Cooper Rush comes in and helps them beat the Cincinnati Bengals in week 2. And he said he wants Rush to play so well that there would be a controversy as to whether Dak would assume the starting role if he was healthy enough to play. Jones said, of course I would. Of course. That means we would have won. If he comes in here and plays as well as Prescott played, Rush played that well over the next games ahead, I'd walk to New York to get that. He referenced the way that Dak played during the season that Tony was injured. He went on to say, well, of course, we want Dak to be here next. That's the thing. But Dak and I want Rush to lead the team to victory here and get another win. That's the way I'm looking at it. Back when Dak was playing instead of Tony, it was game by game. It wasn't the long look ahead we had after 2 months to look back. It was actually play-by-play, series by series. So do I think it's possible for Rush to come in here and play to a level to win games the way Prescott did when he took over for Romo? Yes, I do. I certainly think that's possible. So, Brandon, this is a man who cannot stand not being in the news at all times of the day. That's all this is. Because he knows this isn't actually going to happen, and he doesn't actually want this to happen. And so he's just going out here to speak to this so that people, once again, you could see the shit-eating grin on his face here. Jerry Jones is Skip Baylessing us all right now, and I respect the hell out of it. But man, it's got to be hard being a Cowboy waking up think, all right, we managed to stop the bleeding after 1 week with Dak hurt. Here comes a whole other batch of questions about what's coming up for us.
Jerry Jones's shit-eating grin is his resting Bill face. Like it's just whatever. It's just what he usually does, and I think he does want a quarterback battle because there will be one. So he's trying to accept it as a reality, and I'm so glad that that's what he referenced Tony Romo, because that's exactly what I thought about. I was like, hey, we thought it was very silly when Jerry Jones was talking about the possibility of Tony Romo coming back and competing with Dak. At that point in time, Dak had it locked up. This may be the same situation for Cooper Rush. Maybe we think it's silly that we're even talking about it. Maybe the Cowboys can get some money back on Dak if he gets traded away by the trade deadline or something. Like, hey, quarterback competition is healthy for a football team.
I appreciate the fact that you hung around that Fox building to huff whatever fumes come out of the pipes there that leads to this kind of takery. I appreciate it being out in the universe. That's exactly what it is, man. Jerry wants to get us talking, and he always accomplishes the mission. Two great Cowboys tangent headlines for the day. Brandon, let's finish off with a nuclear football, though, because that's exactly what we got out of the world of college sports the other day. A University of Utah student was arrested. This is the third, by the way. A University of Utah student was arrested on Wednesday after she allegedly threatened to detonate a nuclear reactor on campus if Utah lost to San Diego State over that past weekend. According to police, the 21-year-old student allegedly posted on social media that if the Utes lost, she would be, quote, detonating the nuclear reactor on campus. After identifying and interviewing her, she was booked in Salt Lake City jail for making terroristic threats. She was released later on Wednesday. The police said they have zero tolerance for those threats. For what it's worth, Utah defeated San Diego State 35-7. And we now hope that their running back scores at least one touchdown in this upcoming game. But Brandon, we all looked at that and said, made a lot of the same jokes. Like, all right, if you clearly don't care this much about your football team, do you even care? Neither of us has threatened any sort of nuclear explosion if Notre Dame doesn't go out and win. Have to wonder if we want it bad enough. Then people started asking the real question, which is, wait a minute. Why is there a nuclear reactor on Utah's campus? Then people started asking the even more important question. Wait a minute. Utah can't possibly be the only campus with a nuclear reactor on it. And you would be right, Brandon. And thank you to Douglas Reyes Saran, who is the AV editor at Rose Room Company and the co-founder of and one of the producers on the Fullcast After Dark here on the Meadowlark.
Wow.
Excuse me. One of the co-producers of the Fullcast After Dark, part of the great Meadowlark Media family over there with our friends at the Shutdown Fullcast, tweeted at me the full list of schools with nuclear reactors on campus. And so I just want to do this as a public service for everyone. If you were wondering, does my favorite school have a nuclear reactor on campus, or in one very obvious case too? Here are the following schools that have chosen the nuclear option. Idaho State University, Kansas State University, MIT, NC State, Ohio State, Oregon State, Penn State, Purdue, Reed College, Rensselaer Polytechnic. This one I appreciate because they just decided to wear it. Rhode Island Nuclear Science Center. We knew they probably had something. The University of California, Davis, the University of California, Irvine, Florida, Maryland, Massachusetts, Lowell, Missouri, Missouri S&T, New Mexico, Texas, Austin, Utah, Wisconsin, Washington State, and, drumroll please.
Oh, actually, I got a real one if you'd like.
The only campus
Go ahead.
with 2 reactors, Texas A&M, because of course.
Ooh. Why does that make perfect sense?
Because everything about Texas A&M is excess because Jimbo Fisher has an insane contract done up by a super agent that has him about $85 million guaranteed on the books for them. Brandon, the only thing I could think of all this is the next time Nick Saban is in front of the Alabama Touchdown Club or whatever group of boosters he's in front of, he's going to be chiding them about the fact that Alabama does not have a nuclear program on par with the other universities. And if they want to go out there and go down to Texas and have another nail biter of a win because Texas has a nuclear reactor on campus, then they can just sit and let that happen and let this program fade into anonymity.
With this story, I can do nothing but think about a friend of the podcast, Jessica Smantana, and her tweet that said, and people say girls don't care about football.
Tell ya, she was ready to go for it. And let me as someone who is currently reading Midnight in Chernobyl about the nuclear disaster in Chernobyl in Ukraine, let me tell you, the whole book is basically about negligence and about how a bunch of people not operating by safety standards and operating machinery that probably wasn't assembled in a safe way anyway. All sounds like things that could absolutely be replicated on a college campus. So everyone, please be careful. It's football. It's a game. We don't need to escalate this to any certain point here. The last thing we want is a nuclear standoff between SEC teams, because if there's anyone that worries me with their finger on the trigger for that, it's the Southeastern Conference as we currently sit. So arm yourself with knowledge. We have given you those. So now that you know, if you're making a visiting trip to some school, you're ready for a football weekend, maybe talk a little bit less shit drunk in the parking lot when you know they got the nukes on campus. That's all I'm saying.
That's a long list, Mike.
That's a long list. Hey, listen, all we can do is arm people with knowledge. The rest is up to them. We appreciate you sticking around to get this nuclear game. If you enjoyed it, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review GoJo wherever you get your podcast. 5-star rating, review, unsubscribe, resubscribe. Tell a friend this weekend. Find a buddy and say, hey, I think I got this podcast that you're probably going to like here. I had no idea that college campuses had nuclear reactors on them. And then they told me, and now I'm better off for it. And then have them download, subscribe, rate, and review as well. 5-star rating, review. Head on over to the GoJo playlist on the DraftKings YouTube channel. Subscribe to that so you can see our bright, shining faces. Thanks so much. Be safe. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you Monday.
Y'all come back now.
Ow! Woo, woo, woo! Woo!